Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of Indivisible Northern Kentucky District 4's Coffee Klatch Conversations with Candidates. I'm Andrea Ankrum and I'm the outreach coordinator for the group. And we put together these little talks so you can get to know your candidate, especially if they're going to be in a primary. We're focusing on candidates who have primaries first. But we're doing this so you can get to know them from the comfort of your own home. This is live right now. If you have questions, we encourage you to submit them. We will try to get them to your candidate to ask them. Otherwise, we have questions that are already thought out from our members. And so right now I'm going to introduce our candidate for today, Jesse Parks, District 60. Welcome.
Thank you.
Why don't you go ahead and talk about yourself a little bit, your background, and why you want to run?
Absolutely. Again, my name is Jesse Parks. I'm running for state rep in District 60. Which is a fairly large district. Walton, parts of Walton, Florence, Union, and kind of stretches up the top by the Ohio River and Rabbit Hash and that kind of thing. I'm running because for too long my district has been represented by someone who doesn't seem to be participating in public debate or anything to move the ball forward as far as Kentucky's future. I really believe that every decision that we make has to be weighed and judged by what's best for Kentucky's children. And I feel like the gentleman that inherits the seat right now is Sal Santoro, and he really has no, other than being a kind of an obstructionist and a vote no on everything type of politician, has no vision for the future of Kentucky's children, which is, to me, the utmost importance. To build a brighter future for Kentucky, we need a bright future for our children. And that's really why I'm running.
That's great. It's a great reason to run. So, okay, we're going to jump right into our first topic, and it is Senate Bill 1, which is a hot topic right now, right?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the pension issue, including how should they be funded and the future of the pension system in Kentucky? Do you agree with what the governor is proposing? If not, what do you propose instead?
Well, you know, it's been a tough issue. We know that over the last 20 or so years, the funding hasn't been there. Various administrations just haven't put forth the effort to fund and fix the pension system. That being said, what we really need is leadership on the issue, and it starts with revenue. Mm-hmm. We have to find new sources of revenue to fix Kentucky's pension system and to make sure that it's solid and stable for the current pensioners and the future pensioners. You know, and this goes back to protecting the future of Kentucky. We need good educators to stay in the state rather than leave. I mean, here they can go across the river and get a pretty good deal over there. We need you know, teachers here in Kentucky don't get Social Security, so there is really no fallback for these folks.
This is all they have.
And let's face it, I mean, this is a difficult job being a teacher. It's a valuable one. It's probably one of the most valuable jobs in the state. So we need to have the strength to fix pensions, and it starts with revenue, which is one thing that's missing in the current crop of legislators. They're really not willing to put forth any revenue generating ideas on the table.
It seems like they just want to cut things.
Yes, and that's sort of a throwback to you know, previous generations of politicians where you kind of cut yourself into a profit type mentality. And fortunately for government, you know, government isn't like a business. Government has to work for everybody. It has to work for everybody all the time. So, and again, it has to work for Kentucky's children. And so what's best for, as far as Senate Bill 1 goes, it's not a viable option, kind of period. It cuts benefits. It's bad for the Kentucky teachers, for their pension, and it's not the promise that we made them. You know, and we made the promise. We have to keep the promise, and we have to keep the educators here in Kentucky. And as the state grows, if we want it to grow, if we want companies to locate in Kentucky, big multinational corporations, they won't do it if we don't have a good public education system.
So Senate Bill 241 is proposing a constitutional amendment that would allow casino gambling and require 100% of the proceeds to go to funding retirement fund systems. Would you be in support of casino gambling or other types of gambling as a way to fund some of these retirement systems? Or are there other ideas that you have of new revenue, like you talked about?
Right. So as it relates to gambling, I understand the opposition to gambling. It's a touchy subject with some folks. I believe that yes, on that House bill, casino gambling is all around us. We're allowing the other states to capitalize on this business, so why not have it? As far as we already have gambling. We bet on horse racing.
Right.
It's a big deal here in Kentucky.
It's a
So
big industry
why
for us.
not bring in the other components to gambling? Sports betting, for example. March Madness is upon us, right? So how many people are participating in sports betting when Kentucky can be capitalizing on that and using it as a way to raise revenue for things like pensions and per pupil funding, even that kind of thing.
Right.
So I think absolutely yes to almost all revenue generating items. Now there's several other ones. Medical marijuana can be used as a revenue generating crop. If we figure out ways to do economic development properly, more taxpayers, more workers.
Right.
Right now, I can tell you in Boone County, we have a pretty low unemployment rate, which is great. But I also know, because I'm a manager in a local business, it's tough to find people, right? There's a whole subset of society that's not in the job market because of prior convictions, or maybe they're in recovery from drug abuse.
Right.
So what we need to do is try to remove the barriers so more people can get into the job market and into the workforce.
Right.
And that would create more money into the economy.
Absolutely.
In Kentucky, we have several issues. We have an outdated tax code. We have this unwillingness to try new and burgeoning enterprises, like medical marijuana, like casino gambling. We need to have an all-encompassing approach to fixing not only just pensions and for teachers and firefighters and policemen, but we need better schools, period.
Right.
We need some places need more schools. I can tell you in my district we're building another one. So, how are we going to attract talent if we don't have a proper pension? They know we can't get Social Security if you're a teacher.
Right.
So they're going to have to figure out a way in which to build a compensation package for new teachers.
Exactly.
That keeps them in Kentucky.
Right.
In order, again, to have a bright future for the children, for the economy, and for those that choose to stay and retire here in Kentucky.
Absolutely. So going back to the marijuana, what is your stance? So you're obviously pro medical marijuana. What about legal recreational marijuana as a way to bring revenue in, or even reviving the hemp industry? I mean, that would be a way as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. It's a great question because, I understand both sides of the debate as far as recreational marijuana. Some people view it as a gateway drug. Some people think that, it's bad for, children and young people. And, there's some truth to that, What I think is we need to look, as far as recreational marijuana, at the other states that are doing it successfully, and what about their system works and what about their system doesn't work. And I know the people of Kentucky, and I know that we can design a system that works for us. For example, we can use technology to regulate marijuana sales. We need farmers to have another cash crop. The people that are in rural areas of Kentucky that were hit hard by coal dying out as a viable option for power plants and being replaced by natural gas and some other things, those people can be retooled, retrained to work in that industry. And as far as the cultivation of marijuana goes, one of the first steps that I think would be something that we could actually do would be to grow marijuana for the other states that do have recreational use and do have medical marijuana infrastructure. Why not be a state that grows marijuana for these other states instead of importing it from Mexico or Canada? So I think that there's support, especially among the farming communities in rural areas, to just go ahead and become a cultivation state, and then we can work on the other issues a little later. And then the other thing that I would like to point out is this: if we are worried about things like the budget, and we're worried about spending money, we need to decriminalize the use of marijuana. So we're not incarcerating and charging and clogging up the court system with people that have these low-level drug offenses like marijuana and that kind of thing, and to stop putting roadblocks in people's lives by convicting them of these crimes, so it's harder for them to enter the workforce again. So there's a multifaceted question there, and I think that medical marijuana to me is a no-brainer. For one, the one thing that I think about all the time is veterans. My stepfather's a Vietnam veteran. He could benefit greatly from legalized marijuana, medical marijuana. I think about people that are prescribed, sometimes overprescribed, opioids and prescription painkillers. How much of that could we do away with if we just had another viable option? So I think that Kentucky's ready to at least give medical marijuana to people that have terminal illness, veterans, people that struggle with very serious conditions like cancer and other diseases. I think we could do that right now if we had the leadership that we need in the state legislature.
Absolutely. Okay, we have an online question. Please talk about health care in Kentucky.
That's a great one. If you want to be a great state, you have to have great health care. And you have to have access to health care. Here in where we live in Boone County, we have some great hospitals. Fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to look at it, they're run by sort of pseudo, semi-religious organizations that sometimes limit treatment options for women, and I'm opposed to that. I think that access to health care has to be universal in nature. If you're a hospital, you have to offer procedures that are safe and accepted by the medical community, regardless of your ownership's religious views, because we open ourselves up to some fairly dangerous and unfair practices. But the other thing is, Kentucky being a pretty vast and rural state, there's a lot of people that live places that don't have any health care. That don't have access to hospitals and clinics. And I was the other day, I saw a mobile University of Cincinnati clinic outside of the business doing scans and that kind of thing, and mammograms. And that's wonderful, but we need to have these priorities as a state. And the priorities have to include access to safe health care for everyone, regardless of their economic situation, whether they're poor or wealthy or rural or urban or male or female or any type of minority or gay or lesbian for that matter. And it needs to be affordable. We don't welfare or Medicaid work and thing that Mr. Bevins is trying. The work requirement is ludicrous to me. I get the philosophy behind it that some of these people can work. That the people on the right sort of feel like they're maybe taking advantage of the system.
I feel like they think everybody is like everybody who's on Medicaid, isn't working and doesn't want to work, and I think that's. I can tell you, if there is any sort of siphoning of the system, that kind of thing, it's very minor. And if we want more people to work, and we want more people to contribute, let's remove the barriers for ex-convicts. Let's remove the barriers for people that are in recovery. Let's have job training for women that have just given birth to children that might be struggling with addiction. Let's
try to help the people that are not in the job market now because of the things that I just mentioned get into the economy, and then we would have a better tax-paying base.
Right.
And we wouldn't have to make sick people work a certain amount of hours.
Right.
And I'll tell you the other thing that's ironic about that program that he suggested is, this is a gentleman that's supposed to be against big government. Well, this creates a whole nother bureaucracy to keep track of the amount of hours that someone that is on Medicaid or is sick and already isn't working to keep track of that person.
Right,
so we're going to have now more government, more
right.
government workers, more spending, just to keep track of this system. So, access to safe, affordable health care is a must in a state like Kentucky and, quite frankly, in the United States.
Right. So how do you feel about single payer then? I know a lot of people support it, and then a lot of people on the other side don't support it because they feel like they're paying for health care for other people, which we are anyways, you know, and it's the healthcare system that we have now is very, it costs a lot, and do you think that we could ever move towards a single payer?
Well, I'll say two things. One, that's a sort of a giant national issue, right? So the position I'm running for maybe would have no influence on a single payer versus anything else. As a personal philosophy, I believe that America is the greatest country on earth, and being the greatest country on earth comes with some responsibility to care for all citizens equally, regardless. I believe that no one should go broke over medical bills. I believe that regardless of your race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, you should be provided a level of basic health care in this country because we can do it. We're big enough, we're wealthy enough, and we have a mentality to sort of take care of each other as Americans, and it starts with that kind of basic thing. Hey, if you have a broken arm, we need to fix it for you, regardless of whether you can pay for it or not.
Right, absolutely.
But here in Kentucky, we did a great thing when Bashir was governor. We had Kentucky Connect. That was a great expansion of the amount of access that people had. I mean, millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people got health care for the first time here in Kentucky. And then we unfortunately go backwards, and we're removing people from the rolls. And that's unfortunate, especially in Kentucky where it's so rural and it's hard enough to get access to some of these services anyway.
Exactly. Yep. Okay. So kind of segueing into the opioid crisis, and you talked about this a little bit already, but there's multiple factors involved, obviously. Big pharma, physicians overprescribing pain medications, and then lack of alternative pain therapies and treatments. What are your thoughts and ideas for combating this epidemic in Kentucky?
Well, again, it's a great question, and boy, are we fighting this epidemic right now, as in northern Kentucky especially, and throughout the state. There isn't a one magic bullet, right? Or we would have maybe done it already. I can tell you this, as it relates to the position that I'm trying to be elected to. The gentleman who inhabits the seat right now has voted against all types of measures to help with the opioid epidemic. He was against the database that people could track whether physicians were double prescribing or the person was going to different. So, obviously that doesn't help if you're opposed to that type of thing. We have to, like you said, stop overprescribing opioids. Maybe because we have medical marijuana. I don't know. We need to do a better job of addiction treatment and not leave it up to these small groups that do such good work in Kentucky, by the way. We in northern Kentucky we have an over reliance on all these beautiful groups that sort of have taken addiction as a cause and a mandate, and they house people and they try to get them sober and then they try to get them out into the workforce, and really with a very limited assistance from the state of Kentucky. In northern Kentucky we've done a good job moving to drug courts, which is great to try to keep people out of the jails because they've been caught with a drug or instrument, paraphernalia, that kind of thing, and to get them help, get them treatment. But we have to fight the opioid epidemic in a multifaceted hands-on approach, and we can't do it with obstructionist politics and people that are afraid to spend a dollar and that kind of thing, because it's too important to the children. And let's, quite frankly, if you have adult children and they're battling addiction, well, they might have children who are also battling addiction. So it's a cycle that we have to break. One of the things that I really believe, and that I talk about all the time, is pregnant women that are battling addiction. This is a way in, right? So if we remove a female that's pregnant from the addiction cycle by having safe, sober housing for this person, for providing care, like we were talking about, medical assistance to her and her child, and allowing her to have a safe environment to birth the child, and then that's away from the people that she's cohabitating with or whatever that keep the influences. And then when the child's born, child care, so she can go to work, job training. I mean, if this person can now go into the workforce and have maybe even employer-provided health insurance, that kind of thing, and now all of a sudden we have a self-sustaining member of society who has broken the cycle of addiction. This to me is our way in, is to deal with the women and girls that are dealing with addiction, because quite often they're kind of drawn into this by the men in their life, and if we can remove them, then we can start a fresh slate over here, and then we can start working on the other folks.
Absolutely. So we have an online question. Can we find new revenue streams to support the services we need to solve our opioid health and poverty issues that we face? So we talked a little bit about this already, but
well, I believe that we can. Kentucky has a very outdated tax code. There's several examples. One, which is a glaring one in my business, I'm in the automotive business. In every other state surrounding us, we tax products like warranties and insurance products, and even labor and that kind of thing. So when you buy a vehicle, you're taxed on the car. But if you buy a warranty, the warranty is not taxed here in Kentucky. This, just by changing that alone, would add millions of dollars into the revenue stream. Every other state already does this, and people that come to Kentucky are like, "Wow, it's so much cheaper to buy a car here." When it comes to that component, if you're a very wealthy person and you have a man mow your grass, for example, that mowing of the grass is not taxed. So that's one way to create revenue. The other thing is we give away, I don't know, like $13 billion to these huge corporations in the form of giveaways and tax breaks. And we need to stop that and figure out how to deal with that also. We sort of do some wasteful things with our money. We've donated a lot of money to movie companies to make these seemingly low budget,
I was just reading about that today.
Pretty bad movies here in Kentucky. And I get the idea behind that. I don't know if we're getting the proper return on investment on something like that.
That might be something else to look at.
So there's a bunch of ways to fix revenue. We're right now in Kentucky, the people on the bottom are paying the most of the percentage of the tax money. We need to fix it so the people that can help with the problems that we have here in Kentucky. And I'll tell you what, if we can't find the strength here in Kentucky to fund the schools, to fund childhood education services, to pay teachers, pay policemen, we're just going to have a tough road to hoe. I mean, it's just going to be really tough. So we have to come together as a community here in Kentucky and be willing to kind of fight the tough battles and have the leadership to fix some of these problems, which we don't have right now.
It sounds like we need to get people in who have ideas,
That's
new
correct.
and fresh ideas, which it sounds like you have quite a few of those. Okay, here's another question. Boone County is in need of more low-income housing. How would you, as an elected official, help those in need, especially those with children?
It's a great question. Low-income housing is a problem in a lot of places. Here in Boone County, we're really fortunate because we have this huge influx of population from other places. I mean, I can tell you, in my neighborhood over in Union, they're just building houses like crazy. Unfortunately, some of them are pretty pricey. And so they're great for people that work in Cincinnati. They can live in a suburb. We have really, my kids, my child's elementary school is probably the greatest on earth. I mean, I don't know. I'm not
You might be
exaggerating.
biased
Yeah,
on that.
no, I might be biased. But it is true that we need more available housing for people, again, who have lower wage jobs, who have who struggle economically. And so, how do you do it? Well, you work through city, county, and local governments to set aside properties and that kind of thing. And then sometimes you divert some of the tax money ahead of time, so you build up a fund if you can't find corporations that are willing to build these places.
Right.
And the other thing is you can give, if you're a developer and you're going to build a big 200 or 300 unit homes in an area, you say, okay, we're going to let you do this. We're going to, because it usually costs these governments something to build roads and sewer systems. If you do that, then you have to chip in and build this place over here so we can have rents that are 1,000 or less or 900 or less or whatever it is, so people can live in these places like we're talking about. Well, once we get the women out of the addiction crisis, they're going to have children, they're going to need apartments, and they're going to be working, so they need a place to live too.
So sometimes though, when you want to build some low income housing in a certain district, there's opposition.
Yeah.
You know, so how do we get around that?
Well, you can, there's a, you know, and I understand that. People that, they invest a lot of money in their home, and they feel like, you know, if I'm right down the road or around the corner from sort of low-income people, maybe that hurts my property value. Well, I can tell you, in most of these neighborhoods, we don't have any problem policing the quality of property. You know, HOAs do a great job, right? You can't put up this and you can't do that, and you have to have your grass mowed. And I really believe that it's poverty that makes things look poor. It's in education. It's the lack of education, lack of services that make things look run down and shabby. So it's all kind of connected, isn't it? If we have good education and we have good services and we have a good economic engine and we have the ability to tool and train workers, then all of a sudden their homes won't look so shabby because they'll be out there with their lawnmower and their paint and they're taking care of their houses. And so you know, I understand that, but I think that we as a community can do better. You know.
Absolutely. So how do you feel about charter schools and there's a House Bill 134 would give tax credits for private school tuition, and this would take money away from the public schools. What are your thoughts on charter schools and these tax credits?
I am opposed to charter schools, period. I believe that this idea is born out of people that maybe had a gripe or their public school wasn't good enough. Maybe their test scores weren't right or something like that. But then to say, well, we give up. We're just going to get rid of public education, and we're going to have these private schools. I call them Walmart-style schools. They roll back services to rake in profits. And you know, the charter schools, you know, they pick and choose the students that can go to the school. They manipulate the test scores so they can get, you know, better marketing and rankings and that kind of thing. They do not take the kids that need their help the most. And so what would we end up with? Will we end up with public schools that only help children that battle ADHD or that may be mentally handicapped or handicapped physically? Because charter schools aren't going to take those folks because it costs too much money. And are we going to have you know, vending machine style education where you have to pay per day to go, or you can't? They're going to lock you out of the school. One of my biggest fears is that if like in my neighborhood, like I said earlier, maybe the best elementary school in the world. And maybe a stretch, but and we really feel that way. I can tell you, my neighborhood, New Haven Elementary, and the job that those educators do and those administrators do and the principal does is just impeccable. And I'm in there once a week, just to imagine the diversion of funds away from our awesome elementary school. Away from Ryle High School, which is close to where I live. It's where my daughter will attend. it just seems unimaginable to go to one of these private companies in a strip mall or something like that that can close in the middle of the school year if they feel like it.
Exactly.
It just seems like an overreach, and I think, and the really thing that I hope it's not is sort of a dark agenda to get rid of public education in favor of these private, because we want to make money.
Right.
And again, government isn't for making money.
Right.
It's for moving civilization down the road. And it starts with education.
Exactly.
How many of these problems do we fix if we have a smarter electorate, for example?
Absolutely. Right.
And that kind of thing.
Right,
So,
right.
no on charter schools.
Okay, good. Okay, so we've got an online question, and it relates to a question here that we have about minimum wage. So Senate Bill 17 would increase the minimum wage for many workers to $10 per hour by 2020. Do you support this, and do you think it's enough?
Well, yes. The short answer is yes. I support increasing the minimum wage. Now, again, I'm from business. That's been my background, and I understand the strain that it puts on businesses, especially on the outset of a minimum wage increase. And I understand that the owners of small businesses, it's a struggle, especially when you're trying to figure it all out. What I can tell you is that it's something that we have to do, because it's not fair for someone to work 40 or 50 hours a week, and the minimum wage still puts them at like 60% of the poverty level. It's not enough money to survive. So those people end up taking public benefits, right? Food assistance programs.
They're working and they're requiring public assistance.
And so if we're trying to fix this cycle of spending in the state government, one thing is to try to get people out of the public benefit programs. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to try to pay them a little bit more money. I can tell you that one of the things I think we can get done right now, if we had strong leadership in state government, is the minimum wage increase for tipped employees. For the people that service in these bars and restaurants. And Northern Kentucky's full of them. Great places, but the minimum wage for tipped employees in Kentucky is among the lowest in the country. So we can start with some of that stuff. I could tell you, when I go out, I pay $6 or $7 or $8 for a beer. And then the person bringing it to me is making what $2.15 an hour plus tips. And if it's a slow night, it's really, that's a tough gig.
It's a struggle,
And so if we want to do better in Kentucky, we need to focus on the worker to have a living wage, one that they can live on. So they're, again, all leads back to children, so their children can have a better life, have the tools to sort of succeed, and to get people off of the other public assistance programs.
Absolutely. Okay, we've got another online question here. Please address the DACA population in Northern Kentucky. Many dreamers are living and attending our schools. I want to keep them from being separated from their families. What do we need to do locally?
Well, it's a great question. And again, it's a national issue as far as what to do with DACA itself and immigration and that sort of those battles. But I can tell you locally, again, as Americans, I'm a child of an immigrant. I'm fourth generation. My grandparents came from Italy. And so I understand that America is built on the backs of immigrants. That being said, I understand the other port, the people are opposed in certain ways to that population. I am not. I believe that, first of all, the children that are here now need to be going to school, period. So if you're a child and you live in Northern Kentucky, the schools need to accept you, and you need to get the same education that the other kids get. Because listen, if these children end up staying here and they're not educated, now we've created a whole other subset of society that has no ability to move up. And that's not going to work. So we need to have that available to the children. Housing is important, and right now, unfortunately, in Northern Kentucky, it's difficult. We were talking earlier about how it's difficult for low-income people to get housing. Well, try being low-income and have a status that isn't quite legal. It's even more difficult to try to live and survive. And I tell you, my daughter's godfather is an immigrant from Guadalajara, Mexico. So we're intimately familiar with this situation. My cousin teaches English as a second language in public schools here in Northern Kentucky. We have to, as Americans, have the ability to care for the population that is here. The bigger issue as far as immigration itself, more of a national topic, but we have to have the ability to care for the people that live next to us, that are our neighbors, that our children are friends with, that we're friends with, because that's the right thing to do. You know, we have to have the strength to come together as a community to protect everyone that lives with us. We can't have different encampments of folks. You know, we have to be willing to work together and have access to education and housing and health care, and not leave one set of society out, because if we start leaving this group out, well, we might not always be in our group that we're in now. We might be wedged into these other groups, you know. So we have to care for everybody that lives in Kentucky.
Absolutely. Okay. Higher education costs are skyrocketing. The average college student ends up tens of thousands of dollars in debt upon graduating from college, which, you know, impedes their ability to buy a house, and they're just mired in this debt. Do you have any solutions for this crisis? How can the Kentucky government support our students in the pursuit of higher education?
Great question. This is you know, Kentucky's great because we have some really great universities. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of those, especially during March Madness.
That's right.
You know, again, it goes back to having priorities as citizens of this great state. We have to prioritize education. I feel like we've been talking about education, and that's important to me. In order to have a brighter future, and in order to have brighter students, we need brighter colleges, we need brighter educators, and we need more of everything. We have to prioritize, again, the budget, so we keep education costs of higher education lower, and it starts, again, with leadership in Frankfort. If we don't, it seems like right now, and especially in my district, we have a gentleman that really doesn't place any emphasis on education. Never sponsored, even voted for a bill that would increase funding for higher education. So again, it comes back to what's important to us as citizens of this state and this country. Do we want people not to have access to higher education? Now, I do believe that it's too expensive. So we need a better community college. We need more community colleges. We need, maybe it's not community. I'm a product of a VOTEC school. I went to a VOTEC school. I learned how to be a diesel mechanic before I graduated high school. This was so important to my life. You know, I was a decent student in high school, but I was bored. You know, I was one of those kids that slept all the time until I got to VOTEC school. And then I came alive, and I enjoyed it. And my classes were geared. My you know, English class, the curriculum was geared towards diesel mechanics, and then it allowed me to be engaged and invigorated enough to go to college, to a diesel college in Lima, Ohio, to get a business degree, and then propelled me into the job that I've been doing. So, you know, we have to support vocational training. It starts with having a partnership with organized labor for apprenticeship programs, and, you know, schools cannot be businesses, but businesses can play a role in the schools. You know, so we need to focus on education. I think as far as the cost of higher education, a great way to offset it would be to have more VOTEC schools, more community colleges that operationally are a little cheaper. And then as far as student loan debt, that's a tough one.
I know.
And we need to, there's a bunch of mechanisms in which we can deal with those things. But we have to have an agreement amongst each other that we're going to fight it, and then we're going to fix it. You know, more importantly, because it is an issue and we need to deal with it.
It's a it can be a drag on the economy as well.
Of course.
Okay, right to work issue. We're a right to work state now,
Yes, we are.
And it's anti-union. It decreases the ability of collective bargaining for unions. What are your thoughts on Kentucky being a right-to-work state now, and what would you do if you were elected to address this?
Well, I can tell you, the people that I run into don't understand right to work because it's very confusing.
It is.
It sounds good when you say it, you know. Unfortunately, it's wrong for Kentucky. right to work had nothing to do with work or the right to have a job or anything like that. What it was is a maneuver in which to bust the ability to collectively bargain and break the ability of workers to organize for better work hours, for safer working conditions, for health care. And so what we really ended up doing was allowing environments in which corporations and owners could sort of go back to the olden days where they could make you work more hours, they could treat you unfairly, they could discriminate or fire you on, for unfair reasons, and to put a limit on workers' rights to bargain for things like health care and time off and sick pay. And I think so. A lot of people were confused that right to work was a good thing. Right. And this was explained to me this way. I have a cousin that's a rep for UFCW. If you had a club, right, and you were forced to allow everyone to be a member of the club, but they didn't have to pay any dues, right? Think about, I'm in the pilots. I'm a pilot, private pilot. Okay. I'm in the Pilots Association, so I have to pay dues. I'm an American Legion member. I have to pay my $20 a year to be in the club. So what Right to Work did was it stripped the ability of the union to collect dues from its members if they chose not to pay it. Now, they still have to provide those people representation. They still have all the rights and enjoy the benefits of the union. So it really has nothing to do with anything other than union busting, which is wrong. We need. Every Sunday during the winter, we watch one of the biggest unions in the country play football. The NFL is basically a gigantic union, a players' union. So we're used to these things. Most of our cars that are manufactured here in the United States are made by union workers. The steel, everybody right now is talking about steel, and where it's under the guise of tariffs and that kind of thing. So we need union labor. Period. We need a prevailing wage, period. We need a living wage. We need apprenticeship programs. We need weekends, which is what unions brought us. We need to keep 40-hour work weeks, which is something unions brought us. We need the protection of collective bargaining for large groups of workers to maintain safe working environments. Factories need to be safe. They need to be... we need to have certain standards, and we can't do any of that if we don't have the ability to organize. It all kind of comes from that. So yeah.
So the online question: do you support labor unions? I'm assuming that's it. Yes.
I do wholeheartedly support labor unions, and then oppose right to work.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to talk about guns because that's a hot topic right now.
Sure is.
Should Kentucky have stricter gun ownership laws? What do you feel about the talk about assault rifles being banned? So there's that issue, and then stricter gun ownership laws. How do you feel about that?
Well, I can tell you it's a complicated issue, especially here in Kentucky. For me personally, I'm a gun owner, and I have a concealed weapons permit. And I grew up in a family. My grandfather was actually a gun dealer, believe it or not. That was his job. He had a gun store. So I understand that position, right? But it cannot be a business or an industry without regulation. You have to regulate firearms because they are so dangerous. I spent last week or 2 weeks ago, I was on the evening news twice. I went to the school board and spoke in opposition to arming teachers, for example. This is a very bad idea because, again, my whole thinking and the reason why I'm running is to try to make children's futures brighter. And we can't do that by flooding the schools with instruments of death because of accidents. And it's just too dangerous. So as far as the question goes, assault weapons ban we did under the Bill Clinton administration, and it seemed to have worked, right? It's difficult for a state government to ban assault weapons because they can be. I had a firearm when I moved to California. It was illegal. but all I had to do to make it legal was to change the stock, right? So it's a very hard thing to legislate.
Yeah.
What I can tell you, and what I'm in favor of, is I call it timeout laws. So if you are convicted of a misdemeanor, like a DUI offense, for example, or something, a drug offense, then we should use technology to put a database together that says if you're convicted of one of these offenses, you cannot go into a gun shop to buy a firearm because something's going on in your life that might not be appropriate.
What if you already have a firearm? Like, I think of the domestic violence cases, you know, where women are being killed by, in these situations, and there's already a gun involved.
Yeah. I understand the sort of, the people on the right that are opposed to these national registries of firearms. I don't quite understand it because when I sell someone a car, they have to register the car.
Exactly.
They have to go and stand in line and get the documents and even if I sell a car outside of work and I sell it to you, we have to have paperwork, that kind of thing. So I don't understand why people are so opposed. No one is going to show up at any time to collect people's firearms because of gun control or something like that. This is a lie that's been propagated by rightist, left, NRA and those kind of groups. We need common sense gun legislation and nothing more and nothing less, right? So again, if you're convicted of domestic violence, it's time out for you. You know, we have to be able to know what it is you have, and more importantly, you cannot go buy another gun tomorrow, which is what we saw in Florida. A kid is expelled, and he has multiple run-ins, and now there's no registry to prevent him from walking into a gun shop. So this is, to me, common sense. If someone is, for example, convicted of multiple drug crimes or even a couple of DUIs in a short period of time, something is up in that person's life. And maybe one of the technology's great. I can tell you, when I go on my phone, Google tells me when I log into another computer. Right? So why can't we have a database that says, hey, we know you just got pulled over like 3 times. Why are you in the gun store? You know what I mean? What is going on? You know, and then to say you can't buy one right now. We're going to need a 6-month or a year off or something like that.
Sounds like we have to be smarter about.
Smarter, and again, technology can help us with this.
Absolutely.
And that kind of thing. So everybody knows the guy on their block or their family that should not have a firearm, right? You know, and we just kind of apply those principles to gun legislation.
So talk a little bit about guns in schools then. Why you oppose that in more detail.
Right. So again, you know, I'm a very kind of middle of the road person. I understand the other side on most of these issues. So I understand parents wanting their children to be safe at schools, and this idea of a school shooter comes into the school, and how do we defend them and that kind of thing. So I get it. But I think that the chance of a random deranged individual popping into my local elementary school is far less than a mishandled firearm, a misfired firearm. This is so much more of a chance than people let on to believe. Well, there's training, there's this, there's that, there's accidents. You know, we have car accidents all the time. You know, we have accidental shootings in the schools. I think there was one the other day.
There was.
So this is now what I'm in favor of. Police. We pay a ton of money to have big, large police departments, especially here in Boone County. And the sheriff that's in my school, I talk to him every Friday. I say hi to him. I'm glad he's there. You know, school resource officers. If there's a short, I know one of the things that the post program people think is, well, one's on break or he's out of court or something like that. So we might need more. We might need more school. And again, it comes back to priorities. And when we're talking about funding, you know, that's a discussion that we need to have. But I can tell you, instruments of science, instruments of math, great. Instruments of death, they don't belong in the school. You know, the Second Amendment is obviously about militia members and a well-regulated militia, But we don't really need the civilian militia inside the school. There's no real reason for it.
There's so many other things that we can do.
And one of the points I made to the Boone County School Board was, is the board ready to have, maybe some crazy person comes into school, maybe not, but are they ready to have this gun battle in the school where the bullets are flying everywhere? Are they ready for a mishap where they will have to answer to the parents of that child who was, you know, I can tell you, I had a conversation with my 7-year-old daughter about this. Because she wanted to know why Dad was on TV, and she said, and I explained it to her. Some people want to have the teachers have guns, and she said, she's 7 years old. She says, I don't understand that, Dad, because what if they sit down, and the arm of the chair makes the gun go off, and then and it shoots through the desk and it hits a student. And she's 7 years old, you know, and so she understood this is not safe. Like, you know, you think and carrying a gun is difficult, by the way. It is not comfortable. It's not fun. It's really, you know, not a good thing. You're a teacher and you're outside and you're about to do some fun activity like, you know, an outdoor activity. Now you have this gun, and then you can envision someone sitting it down, or it's in a bag.
That as well.
Or it's police leave their guns on the back of commodes all the time.
Teachers have, I mean, in some of these schools.
So it's just, I get the idea behind it, and I understand it. It's just not going to work in a school. They need to be safe and secure. I can tell you, a lot of the schools don't lock the door.
I know. There's a lot of things that they can be doing.
And we have one of those Sally ports in our New Haven Elementary School, and sometimes it's not. Both doors are unlocked. You know, someone could just walk right in. And I'm glad the sheriff is sitting there now. You know, and I think that's the answer to it. It's just better security, and then like I said, the timeout laws. If you've been expelled from a high school, you might not be able to buy a gun for a while. I mean, it just seems natural to me to make that leap.
Common sense again is what we've said.
You're right.
Okay. Well, we're at the end of our time, so thank you so much for answering our questions. These episodes are being recorded, so if you want to at a later time go back and look at this, it's on our YouTube channel page and our Facebook page. And I'll just give you a couple minutes here to talk to our audience again and just say why they should vote for you.
Right. Again, my name is Jesse Parks. You know, it's important to me to be able to provide a bright future for the children of Kentucky in Boone County, which is where I live. We have to have priorities that allow our society to sort of expand and get better. We have to fight various problems that we have in our society, like undereducation, opioid epidemic. We need to provide resources to get people better jobs, better job training, in order to sort of expand the amount of people that can have a decent life. It starts with leadership, which I can tell you in my district, District 60, we don't have any. We have a gentleman that is an obstructionist. He's a do-nothing politician. He votes no on most items, even budgets that include funding for police departments, for example, and opioid treatment. We have someone that is lackluster, that doesn't really enjoy the job, who is the representative to one of the largest districts in the state of Kentucky. There's more than 60,000 people in this district. Yet doesn't hold a leadership role. When you watch Kentucky Tonight, he's not even in the photographs in the background. You know, he just chairs couple small low level committees. This size district needs a leader. It needs somebody that can bring people together from different parties instead of just being entrenched in one ideology. In order to make Kentucky a great place, we have to have someone that is willing to be the representative for everyone, not just his people, not just the extreme right or the extreme left. We need somebody that can lead and get things done in Frankfort. That's really what we're missing. And it's not just in District 60, but you know, we have to have leadership in order to get the Kentucky that we all see we can have. So it starts with good leadership, and I can tell you, May 22nd, I'm in a primary. I need everyone to come out and support me, Jesse Parks, and then when we get to the November election, it'll be out with Sal. So vote for Jesse Parks. I appreciate everyone's time tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jesse, and good luck.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Have a good night, everybody.
Absolutely.